It's good to see all of you. And I know some of my colleagues are here in the design industry and from Design Singapore and also Spring. And so I'm also feeling that I'm presenting a report card because I speak most of the time overseas and very seldom do I have a chance to be here. So it's really great to be here. And so thanks Design Singapore and Spring for organizing this amazing event. So this being the afternoon, I thought of presenting to you some rather interesting content, but first a confession. When we started the company, we didn't know it would work. It was a big risk. It was a big risk because we were in a sunset industry. In 2004, we did a check on Interbrand, FutureBrand, and almost all the top 10 branding companies in the world. And we had a shocking moment of truth. Turns out that all of them were owned by the big three, Omnicom, Publicis, and WPP. And we go like, oh my goodness, are we going to give our lives for a business model that even our top players are not on their own? You know, it's kind of crazy. And the issue I had was my partners were all in their 50s and 60s. I was the only one in my 20s. I cannot be asking them to come on a battle with me when even the top guys have sort of like, you know, got their exit permit and escaped the business, right? So it's not a scalable business. Then there was another comment by a government. We were working on a grant project, and one of the government officials said, you know, you branding people, full of imagery and marketing, but actually nothing works, you know. So that really affected me a lot, seriously a lot. And then at a certain point, I went to China in the early 2000. And guess what? When I was walking down Wang Fujing, I saw Sun Yanzi everywhere. And I said to myself, we need to do the same like Sun Yanzi. Because the other problem we had was, you know, the government was really helping a lot of the Singaporean consulting firms. You know, they're recommending jobs and everything. But here's the other problem. Because the government was so generous, and truly the Singapore government is very generous. If you go elsewhere, you don't get grants, okay? You have to give grants to the government official to get grants. Yeah? So the thing is, we didn't know whether Consulus was actually valuable to the clients because we were getting jobs because the government was giving grants from 50% to 70% on the project. And so we had to leave Singapore. If we left Singapore, we said that we score big time, and really the feeling was great. When we hit $1 million per project without government grants, then you can start doing the tills and the counter is, bringing in the money. So that was another important realization. So we started going out. This was in Myanmar. We were reviewing a hotel group throughout, and it was really fun. And what we also realized was, in the very beginning, because we started from branding and design, in the consulting world, it's a class system, or I must say it's a caste system. The finance guys are right at the top. And if you are a designer, you're right at the bottom. So if you want to work on a project with a finance analysis, they go like, what, you marketing and design people, you know nothing about finance, So we decided to do the reverse. We decided to hire the finance guys, the data guys, so that they have no choice and have to work with us. And we had to level up and destroy the caste system and unify from finance all the way to design. But it was really painful because it was like mixing oil and water. They don't even want to mix, but we were trying to make them into olive oil and vinegar. So the other thing we learned as we were building the company was we cannot have a company of only young people because we were dealing with people, not just people's money, but we were dealing with people's life. We were serving many family conglomerates. They had numerous businesses. I think Rihan gave you an example. So we serve many family conglomerates that literally own entire power grids, power station, land banks, hotels. You have situation where you go into to review their hotel operations because they have so many interesting vendors and suppliers. The plates weren't all the same. And then their accounting was also very interesting. There is an official book, and then there's second book and the third book. So because of that, we needed to get very senior people who used to work as CFOs, CMOs, who used to work with the big firms, not career consultants, but people who have run businesses and who have dealt with the crises and the challenges, because then they will have empathy. They will know what is the struggle of building a business, or even entrepreneurs. That was very important for us. So we started growing the business and the community. We didn't know, again, we didn't know whether we would thrive, but we just kept trying and trying. Every time people ask us, would you like to do a project in Pakistan? I remember the first time we went to Pakistan, it was 2007, I think. Just after we landed, something happened in Islamabad. But never mind, we said it's far from Karachi, because they were showing us the plans, and we were going to see a retail, a mall, just to understand what is the current situation of how they run a shopping mall. Then after that, we left on an SQ flight. And then our friends told us that, you know what, after you guys left, after reviewing that place, they found a bomb in the shopping mall, you know? And we go like, whoa, what a close shave. But just to tell you, in order to stretch and bring the business overseas, we did a lot of crazy stuff. We went to what we call places where people didn't want to go. But that was great. Because we went to places where people didn't want to go, we were able to take on much more complex projects in terms of size, in terms of scale, in terms of staff strength, in terms of the complexity. So we are now in Singapore, Argentina. It's very interesting. Bangladesh, Brunei, Italy, we started 2 years ago. Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Vietnam. And I'm very happy to say that yesterday we had a confirmation we will also be flying to Brazil in 2017. Another interesting thing happened to us. As we were building the business, we didn't know the Singapore brand of innovation was rising. F1 really helped, you know. After F1 happened for me, everywhere I went, Singapore must be an interesting place. They saw pictures of the skyline. I was invited to speak at many conventions overseas, and people said, Singapore must have very good ideas. Then after they built Gardens by the Bay, they said, whoa, this is amazing. You've got this idea of Gardens by the Bay, and you've got the F1. You must be doing something right. And building on that, it just kept going on and on and on for us, and it's been on the upswing. So, what happened in the very beginning? In the very beginning, we started with branding. But in a lot of branding projects, the biggest problem is not the packaging. The biggest issue is not the positioning. The biggest problem is leadership. You have leadership who have the wrong ideas or who have the wrong premise of building a brand. And they are not even clear about it themselves. And they are not even clear about the business models. And a lot of business models just won't work. For example, we are in a situation where we are overbuilt in property. We are also in a situation where there's oversupply of brands in a lot of categories. Procter & Gamble, from last year till now, are trying to sell off brands, are trying to consolidate brands, and they are not alone. Some of the largest FMCG companies, conglomerates, are trimming down on brands. It's not more branding, it's less branding. So those are the things that are really happening. So one of the things we decided to do was we have to get into the boardroom. So with the financial managers and directors that we hired and the business people that we hired, we started to change and go into the business model first, then the organization model. Because another problem you have in Asia is you have good ideas. You don't have enough good people. Singapore is a classic example. The Singapore government and the multinationals that get the cream of the crop. So what you have is a very interesting situation, which now actually is starting to reverse because a lot of younger people are starting to go into fintech, startups, so that improves the situation. But what you have is a lot of the mid-sized companies, they do not have access to the cream of the crop. And when you don't have access to the cream of the crop, you cannot grow very fast. And that's why even if you can grow the company to 400 million, 500 million, you either have to accept a merger and acquisition proposal because you don't have enough talent base. Talent is extremely important. So talent is a huge problem in many of the Asian countries. So talking about organization model is simple. Drawing out an org chart is simple. But the thing is, how do you deal with the business model, the right business model that will allow you to attract the right people? Then you can execute the brand experience. And here's the other thing that we also did that was quite different. You know, designers also have another nickname. Designers' nickname is called last-minute geniuses. You know why? A lot of times, the business consultant finish their planning, finance have done their feasibility study, then last minute, they need to launch the brand in 1 month, 2 months' time, they ask the designer, hey, come, work it out. So it's nuts and it's crazy. Actually, it's highly risky. So what we did was, we moved the designers and the human resource and the finance guys to make them start on the very beginning. That means they start off from the research at the first line, and then they continue through the entire process. So it's a parallel track. Now, what we have also managed to do in a very studious way was every single company, the hundreds of companies that we reviewed throughout Asia, we put it into the server system. There is a continuous understanding of the algorithm and what were the relationships, what did we understand. Now, later on, I'll talk a little bit about the variables that we have been gathering over the 13 years since 2004. And this is really the trump card. If you were to take our methodology and try to use it, you can. But you won't have the insights of the data bank. You won't have the insights of what happens when certain conditions change. And what I think, being a very Singaporean company, for friends who are overseas, you don't understand, we have this thing called kiasu, scared to lose. For a Singaporean company, we were very kiasu in making sure that we are not preaching voodoo. We wanted to be sure that our data was substantive and heavy. So we were always criticizing, reviewing the data, and it evolved the methodology over time. And so what happens in this system is that our overseas partners, when they execute projects in Portuguese and Spanish and Italian, the data is received into our system, and our system, that data is matched with our system, and our system gives a reflection on whether or not it makes sense or it doesn't make sense, and it provides a variance guidance to the consultant, because consultant bias is a serious problem based on the context, based on the background, based on the lack of openness to another discipline. So we had to address a lot of that. For example, some senior consultants can be very dismissive of creative people. If you're too creative and you talk voodoo, and they will go like, you're talking nonsense, I'm not going to listen to you. So that's the thing. So we needed data to ensure that there could be a guidance on the variance. So what was also very satisfying for me is, in 2005, when the government official said to me, you marketing and branding people are full of hot air and full of this packaging image thing, because we did a total transformation methodology, we can make real change, real impact in the companies we serve at work. Wow, that was the most satisfying part, that we are not preaching voodoo and talking just packaging. It's not hot air, it's real stuff. It's rock solid. Well, what happened is, we have 3 levels of process to ensure that the thing will work. First is what we call us. A lot of the practices, whether it's human resource practices, strategy, we try to practice it first, so we are like the petty dish, Then we start to, once it works for a number of years, we bring it out to the clients. And I'll talk about that later. And the other thing that we pushed ourselves was, we lowered our fees, in some cases, so long as we could do strategy work at the top. So long as it was in another industry, so oil and gas, you have now high-speed rail, you will have now smart cities, so that we could acquire data. Data was what we were very, very interested in. We were like you can say that Google and us share the same premise. We would like to be the Google of consulting, right? So Google is very fascinated about data. We are very fascinated about data. And the other thing was to try out in as many countries as possible. So we have done that for the 13 years, the various sectors. I think by and large, we have been calculating. We have $5.2 billion in revenue impact on those projects that we have worked in. And in Singapore, we do work with SMEs. But for SMEs, we work with them for a longer time, because 1 year is not enough. So we work with them for 2 years, 3 years, because they need a lot what we call rapid acceleration, right? Or you have sometimes a company that's not that small, but is looking at transformation, a new retail experience like birth. This was spring maternity. This is at Suntec City, so it's their whole concept store. We developed with them based on the transformation of their business model and the people model. Or something as complex as Bank Islam Brunei Darussalam, which is an Islamic institution, and to transform them in terms of the culture, the business model, and the experience. Now, because we worked so hard on the methodology, 2 years ago, we signed an exclusive MOU with CPG Consultants to merge their methodology and our methodology into something called Place Call. Now, I cannot show you Place Call yet, because Place Call is going to be unveiled in August at Gardens by the Bay. If you like, I'm also promoting, you can come for Shape the World Conference this year, right? So what is Place Call? Place Call is the first 360 innovation development scheme, from master planning of a city, architecture, business model, service design, and all the way. So we bring our best of class from business to design and combine with CPG Consultants with their best of class from master planning, architecture, landscaping, and sustainability consultants. And what it gives us under Place Call is we have access to 2,000 consultants worldwide to implement projects from airports to entire cities. Some of the projects we have done in Singapore is working with Ministry of Health, Tan Tock Seng Hospital for Health City Novena. We just won the Da Nang master planning project. And actually, if you look at all the projects we are working on together with CPG under Place Call, we are doing almost the equivalent of 4 Singapores. But here's the thing. The other thing I'm very happy to say is that one Italian university is studying the methodology of Consulus. And we have signed an MOU with them to bring our leadership program over there. But I want to say this is because we were in the sunset industry. And because from a sunset industry standpoint, we just tried and we made the decision. And we made the decision to do something different, recognizing our existential state. And therefore, it allowed us to have a new sunrise. Now, I'm just going to jump through very quickly an example and say this to every one of you, that the future is shaped very much by your purpose and how you design your system. This is the first principle of business design. Now, what is actually more frightening than robots? I know robots can be cute, but they are also frightening. Just as this graphic is a little bit cute. Okay. What is most frightening is, based on our working experience so far, most organizations are too confident about their survival rate. In a lot of the organizations, right, most companies and organizations ask for touch-up. They want a brand, they want packaging. Then only 35% of organizations, governments, or whatever, they will do a little bit more. They will transform the service experience. They will transform the way they sell something, but that's it. But overall, even if you look at the listed companies, only 5% will do what we call transfigure, which is to dare to question, is there a role for the business? Maybe the management has to change. Maybe the people in management has to change. Maybe the way we have been doing business have to change. So there is a reason why only a few companies make it beyond 100 years, that 5%. And that's something we all have to acknowledge. Not all companies are going to, a lot of companies are not going to die because of robots. You're just going to die because you're too optimistic about your survival rates. So what we have found in the research is this. An innovative state is a company that is aware of functional, that means you're aware of what you're supposed to do, and existential. Why are you doing it? If you're too functional, oh, I'm a bakery shop. I make great cakes. Buy me. I'm a great brand. I have a long history. Then it's what we call a stagnant stage, where you do not have the ability to rethink and reimagine. And what happens if you're in the stagnant state for too long, you end up going towards the panic state because you start worrying and fretting, right? So Samsung is a little bit in that situation. Apple is scarily going towards this situation if Apple is not careful, because it's like, look, we're doing very well, life is good, making a lot of money, why worry? Yeah? So Microsoft, interestingly, went from this to back to this. Right? Very, very powerful and very, very interesting. So, how to ensure balance? First, most people don't care about your vision or purpose statement. Try this. Go and ask your staff. Okay? You probably like it very much because it's on your door or whatever it is, but most staff don't care. But it's your job to make them care. Okay? It's not their job to say attitude problem, because attitude problem don't solve any problem. Okay? So it's your job to make them care. The second thing is, if you don't build a system that rewards, incentivizes, or a culture that delivers something according to your purpose, it's not going to work. Because innovation, what we have learned, is an issue, is a relationship between purpose and how the system comes together. That's when you get the process of innovation. So whenever we study the organization, we look at the revenue, the culture, the partnership structure, whether it's family-owned, partnership-owned, whatever it is, how do they take information? If your boss says something and everyone listen, but somebody says something, everyone don't listen, that's very interesting for us. How do people share information, right? And in order to test people, to test whether or not something is truthful, we go through this, what we call a 6P process. We look at the company's plans. If somebody says, I care a lot about people, okay, let's look at your people plans. Who is in charge of your people? How much is he paid? Salary speaks the truth, right? What are the processes that show you care about people? What are the practices that your people know that you really care about people? How many times do you talk about caring about people? Do you only talk about caring about people when the news reporter comes and interview you? Do you talk about caring for people when the lights are not shining on you? And how do you measure how you really care about people in terms of revenue, in terms of growth, in terms of innovation? So typically, what happens is all that information gets captured into 3 categories. How a business perform, how a business influence, and how a business differentiates itself. This is purpose. Ceradise, this company was a bridge building company. They have no idea on how to do development. Huh? They are very good at building bridges in the forest of Borneo. And they had a very interesting name. Guess what's the name? Very strong word, titanium. So when we started working on the project, they had all this Western-sounding name, and we said that, you know what's so special about your place? He said, what? Let's ask the people of Sarawak, what do they think about the place? So we did a story contest called Kuching for Me. And turns out the people of Kuching say, Sarawak is like paradise. So we renamed them, called them Ceradise. Right? So with them, we developed a purpose statement that became the guiding statement for the entire strategy, which is to bring Sarawak out to the world. Because if you were to search the word Sarawak, it's always rainforest and drugs. Not very good, huh? Okay? So the idea is to bring Sarawak in, to develop it and to bring it overseas by bringing together the identity, the greenery, and the arts. So they have this huge piece of land, and this is not the only one. They have many, many parcels of land throughout Sarawak. But the whole idea is this, is to use every opportunity to bring a touch of Sarawak into the development. So this is the Food Street Mall that we are launching this year. Now it's being constructed. And even all the trees, they are there. They have to be linked to Sarawak flora and fauna. So it cannot be just some random trees that it looks nice and you just park it down there. And the whole idea for the place so far is that the business model is not just about building. The business model is about bringing people together, uniting the Sarawakians, and giving them a sense of identity. The other thing that we do a lot is reshaping how people think about an organization. You know the word human resource. The word resource should be banned. The moment you look at people as resource, and that's it, there's a price to it. But the thing about people is creative value, right? So we don't call human resource. We change their HR to call it talent development. Okay? So there's no human resource here, there's talent development. And the thing is this, every senior director are taught how to do what we call personal journey with the staff. How do you guide them? How do you develop their careers? And that's really, really important. If you care a lot about your staff will fight for you. If you can't be bothered to do a proper review and you anyhow take, then you kena, in the Singaporean lingo. Yeah? So this is an example of how Consulus does it. In Consulus, every year we have this thing called bonsai. You know what's a bonsai, right? It's a nice pot. You have to trim it nicely so it looks beautiful. So the most junior consultants will critique the most senior consultant. This year, the way you do some things is not so nice. You know, I had a misunderstanding. I don't know what you're trying to say. Relational 360. If you have done 360, right, it's all written. This is relational. So we introduce bonsai to the clients in order to teach them how to do affirmation. and communication. Because a lot of Asian companies, they don't know how to talk to each other. They can talk to the press, but you ask them to talk to the staff, they don't know what to say. Okay? So then, the last part, which is the most important part as a conclusion of it all, is that at the end of the day, the brand experience needs to be something that's linked to the strategy. It's not so much about a nice logo or nice packaging, but how it all comes together. So because Paradise is all about the Sarawakian experience, so we had to create a little bit like a rainforest experience when they went to this beautiful hotel. And you know, the place where they are in, Kuching means cat. But you cannot just use any random cat. You need to have a branded cat. So how designers work with them, and we design the cats. And by the way, what happens is eventually for a lot of these clients, we are helping them hire designers so that they themselves have their own design team. And that's very important. When you have designers in-house and working with an external designer, the level of collaboration is so much easier. So they have also launched a series of merchandise. This has nothing to do with property development, a lot more to do with influencing and bringing the idea of Sarawak to the world. And this is Kuching for me, a new series. And 90 is something like, oh my goodness, you know, if you said something wrong, it's a very Hakka kind of phrase in Kuching. So, thank you. Thank you for your attention.